Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Shamar Heron. I am the Executive Director of Michigan Work Southeast, and thank you for tuning in to Workforce at Work. Our podcast is going to discuss all things workforce, and today we have the godfather of workforce, recently retired Director of Michigan Work Southeast, Mr. Bill Sleight. Bill, how you doing this morning?
Very good, Shamar. That was an interesting introduction. Thank you.
Well, we're trying. You are recently retired and basking. You have a glow about you right now, so retirement is treating you well so far.
Well, I've had a few nice nights of sleep, that's for sure.
There it is.
A little less stress.
The most important thing. So what we're going to do today, Bill, is sort of help people understand the basic concepts of workforce. And I thought, who better than someone who served more than 4 decades in the workforce world to come on and give us some foundational information about workforce development. And so my first question for you today, Bill, is what is your definition of workforce development?
Well, Shamar, you know that the term workforce development has evolved over time. And, really workforce development is really a branch of economics where we study how government policies influence the labor market. And so you go back, say, in the United States, for example, where the development of a public education system, the development of the land-grant colleges system, vocational education are some of the early workforce programs, workforce development programs that the government developed. Then you maybe jump to the Great Depression and you see how the government really became the employer of last resort with some really aggressive workforce programs and policies. Civilian Conservation Corps, the Works Progress Administration, and a host of other alphabet soup programs that we all studied in history, of course. One of the greatest of our country's workforce programs was really the GI Bill, where millions of soldiers and sailors and Marines were able to go to college and learn the skills that were needed in the labor force. Our government has a long history, and governments, of course, around the world have a long history of developing workforce programs and policies. And, our current system really evolved in the 60s and 70s, sort of as anti-poverty programs. That we went to a whole series of, again, more alphabet soup type programs during that time. But really evolved into our current workforce system, which is really, I think, the defining part of the current system is that we sort of realize that labor markets are regional labor markets, and you need to address the workforce issues on a regional basis. And so you saw the development of workforce regions and workforce boards and other kinds of systems to really address the needs in their local communities. So that's a brief history of 250 years of workforce in the United States. But I don't know if that answers your question, Shamar, but that's...
It does. It walked us through several decades of evolution of workforce, right? From what we remember as manual labor all the way up to where we're at now in terms of preparing the workforce for the jobs of tomorrow, which are really centered and rooted in technology advancements. So things like Industry 4.0 are starting to become even more prevalent than they were, a few years ago, and especially times and decades ago. So I appreciate that feedback and that explanation. And so you brought us up to a certain point in history. And my next question is, when did you get involved in workforce development?
Well, I think like a lot of people in this field, you don't grow up wanting to be a workforce development professional. So
you didn't study at MSU?
You sort of get into it by accident. So, when I was in college, I was studying economic policy and journalism. I had a dual major, and my academic advisor taught a course called Manpower Economics, And that was sort of the term back then for workforce or employment and training. We've evolved a little bit since then, but that was the term. So being no fool, I took his course since he was my academic advisor. He also was the dean of the college. So
Some brownie points in there.
I took his course. I enjoyed it, but again, never thought that I'd ever work in that field. When I got out of college, like many folks, I was unemployed. I didn't know anything about finding a job. And I read a want ad for a manpower specialist position in Livingston County. And at least I knew what that meant, which
yeah.
So I had no experience, but not quite sure why they hired me, but I probably told them I took a course, and maybe that put me ahead of some of the other folks that didn't know anything about it either. So that was my first hire in 1977 with Livingston County. The job, interestingly enough, for those that are in the workforce system now, we had an idea that if you taught people how to find a job, that maybe that was something useful. So we worked with our local Department of Social Services, is what it was called at the time, our local community education department, and developed a program where we taught welfare recipients how to find a job. We called it a job clinic. We had a 2-week workshop. They came in every day. At the time, it was a pretty novel idea. Wasn't done in too many places. We didn't have a curriculum, so we had to develop it ourselves. We did find some videos and other things to use. We involved our community partners in it. But eventually that model and that design sort of evolved into what we know today as our PATH program, Partnership, Accountability, Training, Hope, where again, the state's Department of Health and Human Services refers folks to us, and it's a multi-million-dollar program. I don't take any credit for that, but I think that was one of the first things I did. And it really taught me that you got to work with your community partners if you're going to be successful in this business. You can't do it alone. And I think by working together with state agencies, our local community education department, we brought in employers and businesses into the workshop as well. We had a fairly successful program.
And ultimately, it created, like you said, a program that we're using here in Michigan, the PATH program. But I think one of the key tenets is making sure people understand how to approach gaining employment. What are some of the key tenets, the basic components of gaining employment? Folks are going to notice I won't talk about jobs a lot because I think job is not what we're after. We are after career opportunities. So you may want to be a registered nurse. You may want to be a physician, but you may have to start as a CLN or a CNA rather, excuse me. So you have to start somewhere and you continue to stack those credentials and gain experience and learning opportunities so that you can ultimately reach your goal, but it's all in the same vein of a career pathway. And that sounds like that was a lot of what you were teaching when you started. What were some of the evolutions or changes in the roles over the years? So you started as a manpower specialist. I love the fact that you said you looked at a wanted ad. Was that in a thing known as the newspaper? And when they had
I guess my first job, like many folks of my era, was to deliver newspapers. Now that's an obsolete position. But it was a newspaper, and there were want ads, and they were really tiny print, and you had to have good eyes to see them. But that's how we responded to jobs at that time. So.
Well, you and your Hawkeyes found an opportunity that led to 43 years of a very prestigious career. So congratulations on everything that you've done over the years. And so from a manpower specialist to the director of almost $13 million organization, what were some of the changes and evolutions in the role, but also in the delivery of services that you could speak to?
Well, I had the opportunity to work in a fairly small office, with so I was able to learn all the jobs that really are in the workforce system. So I was promoted fairly soon to a position where I wrote plans, really developed really a program planning position where we really dealt more with the administration of the workforce programs. Eventually oversaw the entire Livingston County operation when we merged with Washtenaw County back in the 80s, and eventually became director of the Livingston County program in 1991 when Washtenaw and Livingston County split into two separate programs. So I've been a director really since 1991, or was until last week, and evolved, had a number of other roles during that time. But I think the real clear advantage I had was I was able to see and do pretty much all of the roles in the workforce system in my first 5 or 6 years in employment. And so that's sort of a brief history of my career. I think what you ask, how the systems evolved or how my jobs evolved, I guess.
So you talked about the fact that you evolved from the beginning point to you having the opportunity, because of the structure of the organization, you got to learn just about every role, and that prepared you for the director role. Being a director for such a long span of time, you had to see some changes in how the system either delivered services, what the focus of those services became. And, even in the last decade since I've been in the system, I've seen changes from, are we job seekers focused or are we employer focused? We talk about the demand driven system. So changes like that, if you can remember some from the early point and maybe bring us up to today, that might be some insight people could appreciate in terms of our focus.
Yeah, and Shamar, I think you hit on really the major difference that from when I first started in this business is that when we started, really it was a supply side program. We were, quote, we're trying to fix the labor market, fix the workers, whether they had, we were
supply, go into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So we were focusing on all the problems that people have in their lives, whether they're high school dropouts or have offenders or, problems with the legal system, whether they're on welfare or high school dropout, all the different problems that people can face finding a job. And the programs really were funded and centered around fixing those problems, right? Addressing them and getting them ready for careers in the workforce. I think we lost sight of a couple of things. We lost sight, first of all, that people have a lot of strengths and that you really need to emphasize their strengths when you're working with them, not their weaknesses. And that, I think, has, especially in the last several years, especially is really been a focus of some of our attention to do a strength-based workforce development, working to develop really what people do best. But also, we realize that we can't be successful unless we're meeting the demands of our employers in our region. And so if you don't have strong partnerships with the employers, if they aren't actually developing and designing the policies and the programs that are going to meet their needs, we're not going to be successful. And so you can do all the training and all the fixing you want, but if you're don't have a strong partnership with employers, you're really just giving people credentials without giving people careers. And that's, I think, the transition to a demand-driven system involving our employers in the design and the policy development of our programs has really changed our system to what we know it today. And I think given us a lot better chance of being successful in what our core mission is.
Yeah, I think the key word is balance. You have to make sure that you have a human-centered approach that can satisfy the needs of our business community, right? And it has to be regionally. I don't think you can deliver services from, your state capital. It really has to have some key components focusing on the areas that are centric to, a regional approach. So like here, we're covering 5 counties. They're vastly different, but then there's some commonalities that are between all 5 of our counties. And so one of them is manufacturing. It has uh, whether small or large impacts on the community. Some it's all that is there, and others it's just a small fragment of the economy, but still serves a great purpose. But you still have to have the human beings coming in and doing the work, and they have to feel supported. They have to have systems in place when they don't have the means all the time to be able to get to work and focus on the work at hand. So something like the business resource networks that you help get started, um, that's one of the key components in my eyesight that will allow us to have that balance that I talked about a few moments ago, where yes, we're meeting the demands of the business, but we also have a whole human being doing the work opposed to someone whose mind may not be as focused as it needs to be because they have other circumstances happening outside of the work world. Is that something that you could agree with?
Well, sure. And I think sort of to extend that a little bit, I think what we're finding is that the companies that are going to be most successful in adjusting to the changes of the economy are those companies that really take a look at their entire workforce and the needs of those of their workers. And so they support things like the Business Resource Network. Those are programs and policies that that really make them an employer of choice, that make it so that they can attract the best talent. And I think companies, again, successful companies are beginning to realize that they need to invest in their employees. And programs like the Business Resource Network and other programs like that are going to help them be successful. It's a hard sell. I mean, we only have about 20, 25 companies that are in those networks in our region out of the thousands of companies.
Yep.
But I really think that model is one that really needs to be developed and expanded, and it can't work unless the businesses are committed to working with their employees and helping them address the whole person, not just what they do on the 8-hour shift. So.
Absolutely. And, for those who don't know, a business resource network is an opportunity for a business to buy in to having someone come into their business and serve as a success coach. So for individuals who are struggling to maintain the basic components of living, whether it's housing, whether it's childcare, whether it's transportation, that success coach helps alleviate those barriers to them being the best employee as possible. We're going to put some information up for you to take a look around BRNs, but they are a fantastic opportunity to add value as an employer. Sometimes circumstances don't allow for people to come in with everything 100% intact, but if you as an employer are able to provide some of the resources via something like a business resource network, you are therefore showing your employees that you care equally about output on the floor, but you also care about them as a human being. So you'll see some information on BRNs pop up on the screen shortly. Bill, I wanted to know, you talked about the change in the economy and how just time and other factors affect the business world and the workforce world. I want to ask you about something that's really relevant right now, and that's a little thing called COVID-19. And I'm wondering, have you ever been a part of something more disruptive, or have you seen something that was more disruptive to the workforce world and the economy than COVID has been? I feel like this has been one of the biggest disruptors I've ever been a part of. I'm wondering, someone whose career spans longer than my life, if you've seen anything that has been equally or more devastating to our economy.
No, I think certainly in the short period of time since we're still in the same year where we
7 months, 8 months,
7 months
it
or
hasn't been that
whatever,
long.
to have an economy disrupted as it has in that short period of time, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. We certainly have had our recessions, our ups and downs, but they were even the Great Recession of the 10 years or 10, 12 years ago was just one in a line of the business cycle that we've sort of become adjusted to.
10 years or so.
You have disruptions in technology. Certainly you've had the computer revolution, and now Industry 4.0, and all of those are probably long-term more disruptive, but in a short period of time, I don't know that we've ever seen anything that's disrupted as many businesses, as many industries as COVID. And many of those industries will never be the same. Whether you're talking about our restaurants and movie theaters, entertainment venues that have had to adjust to a whole new way of doing business, but probably even more significant in the long term is that people figured out that you can actually work at home and be productive. And as companies figure that out, it's probably going to disrupt our whole urban lifestyle that we've enjoyed, where people go into town to work in group offices, and you don't necessarily need to do that now with the technology we have. And so what does that do to the real estate business in our urban areas?
We're going to put a link to a New York Times article that talks about the great flight from our urban cores across the country. No one needs to pay $4,000 in rent to live in New York City if they can buy a home in some other area where they actually get trees and grass and more property for the value, or more value for the cost. Why not move if I can do my work via all of these virtual platforms? So we are absolutely seeing a major shift in philosophy around real estate, around housing, and the possibilities and prospects of doing work itself. So that's a great point.
And really not even to mention our education system that's learning new ways of doing business. And I don't think we can foresee all the changes, but we certainly, we're not going to return to the world that we saw, that we lived in January and February. It'll be a different world when we come out of it. It hopefully will be a better place, but it's certainly going to be different.
I agree with your optimism. We'll get into some of the discrepancies that I think are happening in the education system on a different podcast. But for this one, we're going to keep it upbeat, and we're going to keep it making sure that we're talking about all of the positives. So one of the last few questions I have for you is, what areas do you see opportunity for in workforce development?
I think there's a number of areas. And, first of all, I think we need to continue to respond not only to the changes that are going on now, but the changes we anticipate in the future. So whether it's getting in front of the Industry 4.0 issues, the automation in our workforce, whether it's the infrastructure issues that are going to be certainly in play as we address not only the physical infrastructure, but the technology infrastructure that our country needs to be successful. The workforce system has to be really a major part of that, and a major part of the solution. But I think the other thing, just in terms of the system itself, in Michigan, we do have the advantage of having an integrated workforce system where we recognize that our local communities need one place where workers and employers can go for their workforce needs. That has to be strengthened. It has to be a system that's more uniform across the country, where you actually do invest in a local workforce system as a national policy, as a state policy, where you don't create these one-off programs and services and make people go to 20 different places to get the help they need. So we need to really strengthen the infrastructure of the workforce system, as well as respond to the changes in our economy and the infrastructure changes that we see with not only the physical infrastructure, but the technology infrastructure that we need to respond to as well in the coming years. So
And you
we have
mentioned,
lots of opportunities there, but we have to be positioned as a system to take advantage of those opportunities and serve our customers well.
absolutely. And speaking of the infrastructure and resources being provided, both on a technology level, but the actual services being delivered, they need to operate with a sense of urgency. Normally, people aren't coming in to work with us because they have this fantastic 3 to 5 year plan. They need opportunities when they're walking in the door. So that infrastructure of resources, programming, support needs to be responsive to the needs of individuals right now. And so the theory of short-term training versus, 2 to 4 year training has allowed us to be a lot more responsive, not only to the job seeker, but specifically to our employers who also are working with urgency, and they can't wait 2 or 4 years for you to develop a skill set. They're looking for you to get stackable credentials that you can gain over time and make you a more skilled worker. So I agree 1,000% around building up that infrastructure. And as someone said, never has technology moved this fast, and never will technology ever move this slow again. So that's a statement that has resonated with me, because just as soon as I get me a new phone, they're marketing the next one, and this technology is constantly growing. I mean, just look at how quickly we were able to adapt to using platforms such as Zoom, and now here we are on a podcast using this platform, where before you had to get two people in the same space in order to have this dialogue. Here we are, a couple miles apart, but I'm happy that you were able to join us. My last question for you, Bill. Any parting words for those watching this podcast? What will be your parting words to individuals who are joining us today?
Well, I think I'll go back to some of the things I said early on, is that we can't do this alone. We have to really collaborate, work as partners in our community with all of with education, government, business, our community partners, and our customers, to really identify and address the issues and problems that we're facing. And if we think we can do it alone, we're going to fail. And so it's a lesson I learned, I think, probably in my first year in this business. It's a lesson that's carried me through 40 years. And, we've built our partnerships in a number of ways over that time. But the stronger we are together as a community, the more successful we're going to be in addressing these issues.
So, Bill, thank you. Thank you for those words. Thank you for joining us at Workforce at Work. You are our inaugural participant, or co-host, or guest, I guess it would be. So thank you so much for joining us and kicking us off and giving us the foundational setting we need to be able to move forward, talking about all things workforce. Again, my name is Shamar Heron, and I appreciate everyone for joining us today. Bill, I wish you nothing but the best in your retirement. Go out and enjoy yourself, and when it's safe, get all of that traveling in that you had planned.
Well, thank you, Shamar, and good luck to you as well. You have a huge job, but you're certainly capable of doing it, and you'll be successful.
Thanks, Bill. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.